Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the e-learning program on Adjara. In this module, you'll learn about the concept of Adjara, differences between Adjara and Sale, Adjara or lease in Islamic banking, process of Adjara, conditions for a valid Adjara, differences between Adjara and a conventional lease, termination of an Adjara, transfer of ownership to the lessee, sale and leaseback, operating and financial lease. Sale and leaseback. I've heard of people selling their home and then leasing it back. What kind of Adjara is this? In case of financial constraints, a person or an institution can sell his or its asset and then lease it back, hence fulfill the financial need and still retain the asset for use against payment of rent. This is called sale and leaseback. Sharia allows sale and leaseback, as one could avoid interest and even then meet his need. Here's an example of a sale and leaseback. Nasser is a factory owner. He's planning to expand his factory but does not have the necessary funds. Nasser could sell his villa to an Islamic bank. The Islamic bank pays him the money which Nasser uses for business purposes. Nasser then leases his house back from the Islamic bank. Most of the Adjara sukuk issued are based on the concept of sale and leaseback. Operating and financial lease. Adjara is used as an alternative both for operating lease and financial lease. An Adjara that is not tied with a purchase agreement is known as operating lease. Adjara that culminates into ownership transfer to the lessee by any of the valid methods of gift or sale can be considered as financial lease in the Islamic framework. Adjara as an operating lease is suitable for expensive assets such as ships, aircraft, and heavy-duty industrial and agricultural equipment. Adjara with the effect of a financial lease is widely used in real estate, automobiles, computers, machinery, and equipment. This is the best method of acquisition if the equipment is used for a relatively short time or if it has a poor resale value. Adjara with the option of sale or gift is permissible as long as the transfer of ownership of the asset to the lessee is kept separate from the lease. Thank you so much for your time and patience. I think we can proceed with this transaction. Let's recap what we have learnt in this module. The concept of Adjara. Under Adjara, the Islamic bank leases the use of an item or facility to a client against an agreed rental for a fixed period. The ownership of the leased item remains with the bank. Only its usufruct is transferred to the lessee. The steps to be carried out in an Adjara or lease contract. The basic rules of an Adjara contract. The period of lease and the rental for the full period is determined upfront. The lease period shall commence from the date of delivery of the property. The bank need not be compensated if any harm to the property is caused by factors beyond the control of the lessee. If the property has lost its function and no repair is possible, the lease shall terminate on the very day the loss has occurred. We also learnt how the Adjara can be terminated. You may now reinforce your learning by going through this topic in the illustrated textbook and check your comprehension on the subject by attempting the questions in the workbook. In the next module, we will learn about Qard al-Hasan. The concept of Adjara. Adjara is a popular technique of hiring or leasing in accordance with Sharia principles. Mr. Arshad, a successful young executive, is planning to build a villa. Engineer Rehan is designing and constructing Mr. Arshad's villa. Arshad is hiring the labor or expertise of Engineer Rehan. This is one kind of the popular concept of Adjara. Adjara is an Islamic term that means to hire or lease a physical asset or services against the payment of agreed rentals or wages. Adjara is used for two different situations: to hire the services of a human being and to lease a physical asset, hiring of the usufructs or benefits of assets. Usufruct means the legal right to use and enjoy the advantages or profits of another person's property. Let's take a look at Adjara to hire the services of a human being. Arshad, the employer, is called the mustajir, one who takes the services on hire. Rehan, who is employed, is called the ajir, or one whose services or labor is hired. Rehan starts to build the villa. Based on the progress of the construction, the mustajir pays the wages or ujrat. Very soon, the villa is completed. Arshad now wants to lease the villa out to his friend Ali. Arshad, the one who gives his asset on lease, is termed as mujir, or the lessor. Here Ali, the person who takes the asset on lease, is called mustajir, or the lessee. This is a direct lease between Arshad and Ali. Adjara in banking. Adjara is a mode of financing popularly used by Islamic banks. Let's suppose Ali wishes to lease or buy a villa but does not have the cash required. He approaches an Islamic bank for finance. Adjara may be defined as an arrangement under which the Islamic bank leases the use of equipment, building, machinery, or other fixed assets that cannot be consumed. Under Adjara, only those items whose original form or structure does not change with use are leased. The lease is for a specific period and for a specific rent. Yes, you can say so, as something is transferred from one party to the other. But there are crucial differences in terms of rights and responsibilities of the parties to the contract. Differences between Adjara and Sale. Differences between Adjara and Sale. In Adjara, the ownership of the property remains with the transferor or the lessor. Only the usufruct is transferred to the lessee. In a sale, however, as soon as the contract is executed and delivery is given, the ownership of the property is also transferred to the purchaser. In Adjara, since the ownership remains with the lessor, he has to bear all ownership-related expenses and risks. In sale, however, all risks and rewards pass on to the buyer as soon as he takes possession of the item. An Adjara contract can be executed before or after the possession of the item by the lessor for its instant or future enforcement. Sale, where enforcement is agreed from any future date, is not a valid sale. A sale becomes effective as soon as the contract is executed. Adjara is always time-bound. It has to be for a fixed time and can be terminated with mutual consent at any time. Sale implies permanent transfer of ownership of the asset to the buyer just after the sale is executed. Adjara or lease in Islamic banking. In Adjara lease, the Islamic bank assumes the role of a lessor and allows its customer, the lessee, to use a particular asset that it owns. The customer receives the benefits associated with ownership of the asset against payment of predetermined rentals. The process of Adjara. First, you will provide us all the relevant information about the villa, like the name of the seller, the selling price, physical dimensions of the villa, etc. Then, you will apply with us, requesting for Adjara of the asset. You will also promise to take the asset on lease from us upon our purchase of the villa from its original seller. The bank will purchase the villa from its owner. The bank will then lease the villa to you. The ownership of the villa remains with the bank, but you will have the right to use it. You will pay fixed Adjara rentals for agreed periods. Conditions for a valid Adjara. Transferring only the usufruct and not ownership is necessary. Hence, ownership-related risks and expenses will remain with the lessor. Things having no usufruct at all cannot be leased. For example, barren land cannot be leased. Consumable goods have usufruct, but they cannot be the subjects of Adjara. Items like money, eatables, fuel, and so on cannot be leased out because they cannot be used unless they are consumed. Remember, if consumable goods are leased out, it will be deemed to be a loan. All the rules concerning a loan shall accordingly apply. Any rent charged on this invalid lease shall be riba charged on a loan. No, since the ownership is not transferred to you, you will not be liable to pay any taxes. However, the water bills, electricity bills, and all such expenses shall be borne by you. You must not use the asset for any other purpose than what is specified in the agreement. In that case, you can use it however you wish. But you cannot use the asset for unusual purposes unless the bank expressly permits it. You are liable to compensate the bank for any harm to the property caused by misuse or negligence on your part. A lessee is considered as amin or trustee, and as such he has to take care of the asset as if it is his own. What about the rentals for this? The period of lease and the rentals must be determined in clear terms at the time of contract for the whole period of contract. Will the rent remain fixed for the whole period, or will it change? Different amounts of rent can be fixed for different phases during the lease period. The amount of rent for each phase must be specifically agreed upon at the time of effecting the lease. If the rent for any phase of the lease period is not determined or left at the option of the lessor, the contract would involve gharar. Can the bank unilaterally increase the rent without reference to the contract? No, that would be violating the contract. The lease period shall commence from the date the property is delivered to you in usable form, no matter whether you have started using it or not. If the property has totally lost the function for which it was leased and no repair is possible, the lease shall terminate on the very day such loss has been caused. If the loss is caused by the lessee's misuse or negligence, the lessee will be liable to compensate the bank for the value of the property as it was immediately before the loss. However, damages to the property by earthquakes, floods, etc., which are beyond the control of the lessee, shall be borne by the bank. Differences between Adjara and a conventional lease. How is Adjara different from conventional leasing? In an Adjara lease, rent is charged only after the lessee has taken delivery of the asset. But in a conventional lease, the lease commences on the agreement date or the date when the bank releases funds for purchase of the assets to be leased, irrespective of whether the lessee has taken delivery of the asset or not. Charging rent before the lessee has taken delivery of the asset amounts to charging rent on the money disbursed. This is riba and thus prohibited by Sharia. In an Adjara lease, all expenses and losses to the asset are the liability of the lessor, since the ownership is with the lessor. In a conventional lease, however, the lessor gets rent on his money and all expenses or losses are loaded onto the lessee. In an Adjara lease, if the bank appoints the lessee as its agent to purchase the asset to be leased, the risk of the asset will be that of the bank, as long as the client serves as its agent for purchase of the asset. However, in a conventional lease, all risks are borne by the lessee. What happens if I am unable to pay the rent on time? It is forbidden in Sharia to charge any additional amount in case of default of payment of rent. That would amount to riba, which is impermissible in Sharia. However, in case of default, you may be liable to pay some money to charity. Termination of an Adjara. How is the Adjara terminated? If you are found to violate any of the terms and conditions of the agreement, the bank has a right to terminate the Adjara contract unilaterally. However, if you do not violate the terms of the agreement, the Adjara can be terminated only with mutual consent. I guess I will own the villa at the end of the lease period. Modern financial leases usually have an implicit feature that the ownership of the leased asset is transferred to the lessee at the end of the lease period. Combining a lease contract and a sale contract in a way that both become part of one contract is not in compliance with Sharia, since they are different in nature. However, there are different options to transfer the ownership title to the lessee at the end of the lease. The rules of Adjara apply till the lease continues. Transfer of ownership to the lessee. Option 1. One party may unilaterally promise to sell or buy the asset at the end of the lease contract. For this, there will be a separate sale contract at the end of the lease. Option 2. The lessor may promise to gift the asset on a particular event, say upon payment of remaining rent by the lessee. Option 3. The lessor may promise to gift the asset to the lessee at the end of the lease. For this, there will be a separate gift deed at the end of the lease. This is particularly so when the asset is of special value only to the lessee and not to the lessor. Option 4. Some lease contracts have an additional clause to transfer the asset automatically to the lessee after termination of the lease. This is not strictly in accordance with Sharia rules. Hence, some scholars say that Ijara waliktina, hire purchase combined lease and sale contract, is not a suitable term for the Islamic Ijara. It should be Ijara muntahiya bil tamlik, or a lease contract culminating into ownership transfer under a separate deal.